Welcome back. If you've been following along up until this point, this is episode 7. Episode 7, we're going to be discussing the actual mounting the AOST tank, or the aerial separator tank. Up until this point, we've finished most of the stuff under the hood as far as putting the fan and everything back on, the compressors mounted. So now we're going to switch gears and switch to the tank. There's two different configurations when mounting the AOST tanks on this particular chassis. There's an inboard kit, and then there's an outboard kit. And the standard configuration mounts on the outside of the frame in the passenger, underneath the passenger door. The inboard kit, however, mounts inside the frame next to the drive shaft. It is the much preferred method because it does bring it off the ground quite a bit, and it, aesthetics-wise, you can't even tell it's there. We will be putting the inboard kit on this one. Now, you don't have to order a separate part number. It comes with every kit out there. It's just not always able to be used. If you're a DEF tank, or you've got a midship fuel tank, this kit will not be able to be used. That's going to determine everything. So, for this particular kit, we're going to put on the inboard. All right. If you look at all the parts you have here, you have the tank, you have the brackets, all your fasteners, your backing plates for your actual mounts. These are your frame mounts here, okay? And then you have your poly lines that are actually longer than the ones that are supplied with the kit. You also have this bracket here. It will not be used on this truck, but this is for trucks that you put these on that have extended cab or crew cab. All right, one of the truck, as you can tell, a little hard to see in here. I went ahead and sub-assembled this. I left everything loose. Let's see if we can get a good scale of it. Alright, went ahead and put your 4 bolts in for your bracket. And added the 2 cross member. And added the 2 supports to go across the cross member. Right here is where you're going to go with this one. So there is a harness that sits here. You need to pull the little connector out. Or it's like Christmas, I call them Christmas trees, but you need to pull it out. But you want the bars to go underneath that harness, and this first piece is going to mount in here. All right, got the harnesses out of the way. Again, we're going in just like this. As you can tell, this notch goes towards the outside of the frame. Take both bars. Again, you can come in from the other side, whichever you think is easiest. These fully threaded bolts are the ones you use for that. Now what I do is I just get them started and just try to bring them up flush. You want to use blue Loctite, but you'll go back and actually do that after you get it squared away. So this is where I'm going to want the tank. I wanted it as far to one side as I possibly can, but I don't normally tighten it up until I get to a certain point. Usually I have the tank set up in here before I tighten these bolts up. Now I do that so I can line it up straight and not have it sitting crooked or at an angle or anything like that. Once you do that, you need to go ahead and start tightening these bolts up and the others. So you got a little bit of side-to-side play here. Let's see if you can see that. A little bit of side-to-side play here, and then you can slide this to a certain point. It's only going to be about that far from the drive shaft when it's done, but it's plenty of clearance. You'll have room to take your center bearing out if you need to. That takes care of getting the front one started. Let's move to the rear one. Do the same thing on the rear one. Difference is, you see this little jog where it's cut down? That goes down because this cross member is up higher than the one in front of it, so you have to drop it down. Again, the cutout goes still towards the outside of the truck. Same way you did the one before. take them and just get them, sit them where they're sitting flush against the cross member. You don't have to tighten them up yet. If you want to, you can, if you got a good idea the tank's going to be straight. What you're going to do is slide this thing far out that it'll go. Alright, see how this cross member has a taper on it? It's only going to slide out so far. Then what you have to do is get these two to line up. You can see we're fairly close now, but we're actually going to slide that front one towards the drive shaft a little bit after we get the tank in. This is the point where I go ahead and put the tank in here. I don't tighten the clamps or anything. I leave the clamps loose. Just slide your tank in and then line your brackets up to where it's horizontal with the drive shaft. If you do that, then tighten down your main brackets here and go back and here, and then tighten these up last. When you're installing the tank, you want to confirm, let me see if I can move my way around here. That arrow is pointing up. You want this tank to be as level as possible. Okay? Now I'm looking at it from the back of the truck right now. So the first thing we're going to do is the bracket above it. Once we get it straight, we're going to go ahead and tighten that bracket up with the threaded bolts all the way through. What I found is easiest, loosen the front all the way up, take one bolt out of the tank strap here, swing it around, slide the tank into the front, so that way it helps you hold it up, and then put this strap on the back. Okay, again, this is still loose. You can see it's wiggling around. I left it loose to make sure we get it level after it's tightened up and we can rotate it in place. Alright. It's not going to be easy to see this. You'll need a 14 millimeter and a 15 millimeter. The 14 millimeter goes to the threaded bolts, and the 15 millimeter will go for the tank bracket. Not the tank bracket, but the actual tank, the bracket mount. Snug those things down as even as you can. Put some torque on these. Alright. That one's tightened down. I'm just going to show you on this one side, and then I'll move to the other and knock it out. Put your 15 on. Go over the top. Sometimes you have to put a wrench in there. Most of the time you just stick your finger on it and hold the nut on the back side, and it'll tighten up. Okay. I did go back and put a little Loctite on these. Obviously that's highly recommended for anything mounted back under here. Alright, now that we have this piece, the actual brackets, done on the rear, we moved the front over to line it up and tighten it up, and we'll be good to go. Alright, to finish out our tank install, we are going to be going the plumbing next. So as you can see, these three lines are the ones that came with the kit. This one, however, is an extra one that I have made. Anytime you put in the inboard AOST like we just did, there's a possibility the lines won't be long enough, depending on the chassis and everything else. Currently, everything fits with the exception of the oil line. So I have a piece made to lengthen that out. The loom here is to cover the poly lines. Make sure those poly lines are 100% loomed. They will have issues down the road if you don't keep them protected. The blue hose is your discharge hose. It's going to go to the big fitting on the tank and the big fitting on the rear of the compressor. Two of the other hoses, those are your oil lines. One's going to run from the compressor to the cooler, the other one's going to run from the cooler to the tank. That's all there is to this. These two poly lines both run from the tank to the air compressor. One's a scavenge and one's your actual regulation pressure. So one will have oil flowing, the bigger one will have the scavenge line, will have oil flowing through it. to help with the separation to keep oil out of the airstream. And the little one is how your pressure is regulated. It'll open and close the intake based on air pressure. So we're going to get this started, and I'll show you what I do is I start at the compressor. Discharge here, and I left the intake off to do this because I like to be able to put the discharge in, and then your oil return from the cooler is right here. And that'll run down to the cooler that we put underneath the truck. Alright, I want to show you the plumbing so far. This is the reason I leave the intake off. You can do it with the intake on. I choose not to. See the discharge hose? See how it's not touching the steering column or the engine? Okay, it's pretty hard to find that perfect spot in there, but that's the way I route this one down. Now, the way I route things is a little bit different than the book actually recommends. However, you do it your way, you take liability for it. I found that this worked pretty good. There's the cooler, there's the one on the bottom of the oil injection line, or oil return line as they call it in the book. And you can see the loomed hoses, and those are, I actually put loom on them. Just a heads up, if you're going to loom a 1/2 inch hydraulic line, it takes a 3/4 inch split loom. Ooh, sorry. Right leg. Here, let me see if I can get down here underneath the truck. Alright. See our fittings. So this is the one that goes to the compressor, and here's the one that goes to the tank. If you get those reversed, it will not cool correctly. So make sure you follow the manual. And again, I loomed both of mine, and I run them up through here with the other lines. Again, this is the way I do it. You do it how the book recommends, or do it whichever way you see fit. Alright, here's where the discharge line and the oil line from the cooler to the OST goes. See, I've got it clamped. You don't have to do it this way. On the 2-wheel drives, this makes it easy because there's nothing here, no drive shaft in the way, so you can mount it to the cross member. I'll turn you upside down. And then connect it to the tank. You do have to spin this oil filter off, take the paper out, put the oil on it before you put oil in the system. But I know it's hard to see. Let's see if I can give you an idea of what it looks like going back up. Alright, see there's nothing hanging below the cross members. It's tied up, going to be no issues. The only thing we have left to do now is insert the poly lines, and the poly lines go to the rear of the separator tank and up to the intake. So got to put the intake on, and then we'll hook those up. Alright, once you've finished plumbing up your main discharge hose and your oil lines, this is when I like to go ahead and put the intake on so we can finish plumbing up the poly lines. I highly recommend this tape, by the way. It's Ranger's tape, and good gosh, it's just amazing. Make sure we don't have any trash in it. Remember, I kept the bolts exactly where they go, so there's no questions. You're going to put it in here at an angle. Now you might have to, I don't know if you can see this, but you might have to rotate this end cap a little bit here so it doesn't touch, but it doesn't look like this one's going to touch. Alright, 6mm. Make sure your gasket stayed in there, or your gasket, make sure your O-ring stayed in there. You do not want to over torque these things. And yes, I usually apply Loctite to them as well. Alright, now we're going to connect our poly lines. When I say poly lines, I'm talking about these two control lines. One's the scavenge, the larger one here, and then this one's the regulation. There is a specific way to install these correctly. There is two different lines, and they're different sizes. So this is the air pressure regulator right here. So you're going to take your regulation line, and it's going to go into this fitting. Now, you don't just push this fitting in and call it a day. Make sure the end is square cut. There is a little ferrule in there, okay? Pull this back where you can see it. Alright, this is where most people stop, right there. That's not correct. See how it's still moving? Pull it out, hold that little tab, and push it in. See how it's not moving anymore? It's got to go through that O-ring, which is, I call it like the second stage being locked in. If you'll do that, these things will never leak. If you don't do that, they're guaranteed to leak. It's one of the most common mistakes when installing these things is not getting these collars pushed in the way they're supposed to be. After you've completed running your poly lines, connecting them, routing them around the frame, you will then take the cardboard piece off the back of the oil filter and put oil on the O-ring, put your oil filter back on, and reinstall. Now we come to the point you can go ahead and fill this with oil. And the reason I say do it now is it's a little bit easier to do it now than by the time you get all the other hoses and the charge air cooler and everything back in. So to do that, take the plug out. It's an 8mm. Okay, you'll pull this cardboard piece off. It even tells you how to do it on there. It tells you make sure you use factory VMAC oil. Do not use any other oil other than VMAC oil. Do not substitute it. There is a reason for all that. What I do is take a clean funnel, stick the funnel down in there, and the first one I do is I usually open a quart to put in the oil filter, so I'll just go ahead and finish it off in here. Now, while you're filling it with oil, you're supposed to grab it and spin the clutch over, and you'll feel it getting stiff. And what that is, that's pushing the oil through the rotor vane, through the rotors, down into the tank. If you don't do this, it'll just spill off the hose, or it'll run back through the scavenge line. And I found the fastest way to do it, you can put a wrench on it if you want. No impacts, no air tools, no drills, nothing like that. Now I found it just as easy to grab it with my fingers or hand and turn it over. Alright, so I'm going to finish getting it filled full of oil, and then we're going to wrap this video up for the day. Thank you again for watching.